Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. This week we're going to be talking about jigsaws, and we'd like to thank Era Jr. for a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And Cindy has been updating and fact-checking the new chapters in our upcoming ebook. This is going to be our 13th ebook, and you'll soon be able to download it on Amazon. And you can check out our other ebooks, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, books 1 through 12.
Yippee.
If you're a fan of Cary Grant,
Who isn't?
You should check out the latest episode of the Secret History of Hollywood podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Part 1 is over 12 hours long,
Wow.
and Adam does a fantastic job with this podcast.
Yeah, he always does.
Yeah, so check it out. It's The Secret History of Hollywood. One of the first portable jigsaws was produced by a Swiss company in 1947. In 1954, Bosch bought the company, and they went on to develop and set the industry standard for the T-shank jigsaw blade.
Shank?
It used to be the U-shank. Now it's the T-shank.
Exciting. What is a jigsaw?
So
Probably
it's
a good way to start, huh?
So this is a saw with a reciprocating blade. It's going up and down rather than a circular blade like a circular saw. And you can use this to cut through a wide range of material depending on the blade you're using. It has a foot plate or a shoe that rests on the material you're cutting through, kind of like a circular saw. But that blade is traveling up and down. The most common blade cuts on the upstroke. But you can get blades that cut on the downstroke if you're cutting through laminates on a countertop or if you have plywood pieces with a thin wood veneer.
So, what's the difference between, a reciprocating saw and a jigsaw?
A reciprocating saw is going to have a wider, longer blade, and that's mainly for rough cutting or even demolition, where a jigsaw, you're going to do much more precise cutting, and it allows you, especially with the very thin blades, it allows you to cut curves. And you can really get fine cuts.
And they're smaller.
Right, yeah. You can use a jigsaw for craft projects. You can cut out shapes in the middle of wood. You can cut openings in cabinets for plumbing and electrical. You can cut notches in flooring to go around objects or openings. I've used jigsaws for cutting out the openings for vents in plywood subflooring before I put down the finished flooring. And then you can cut out the notches on your finished flooring with a jigsaw. With a carbide grit blade, you can cut out and notch tile. You can cut PVC, copper, or galvanized pipe. You can cut down wood trim. You can even use it for coping cuts if you don't have a coping saw. You can cut wire shelving to size. You can cut drop ceiling grids if you don't have tin snips. The foot plate bevels on most saws, so you can cut at an angle, usually up to 45 degrees for miter cuts. I've used a jigsaw to cut down the aluminum legs on an attic ladder. Are we just going to
go through a list of projects you've done?
Yes, I got a couple more. So just recently, I cut down an easy snap cover to size. So it's capital E, capital Z, capital SNAP, capital COVER. This is a replacement hot water baseboard heater cover. It's made out of 20-gauge galvanized steel, and it's perforated for airflow. So it's actually easy to follow the cut line over those holes.
Mm-hmm.
I used a metal cutting blade on my jigsaw with 24 teeth per inch, and it created a very smooth cut. But that's a pretty cool thing. If you have old, rusted, or painted hot water baseboard heater covers, these easy snap covers are an easy way to remodel those.
It looks nice.
All right, well, since you don't want to hear any more of my stories.
JC, I was there for a lot of these projects. I've heard all your other stories. Maybe it's interesting for other people.
I need a co-host that doesn't film all of our videos on our Fix It Home Improvement YouTube channel. So when you're shopping for a jigsaw, you're usually going to be shopping either for a corded or a cordless model. Corded jigsaws are generally going to be lighter than cordless, and many are very inexpensive. You don't have to take the time to charge a battery, and a corded saw is going to have unlimited run time as long as you're close to an outlet, You may need an extension cord for some projects, but for most homeowners doing projects around the house, a low-cost corded jigsaw is going to be a very versatile tool. Some of the cordless saws can be purchased without a battery and a charger, and that's going to help keep the cost lower if you have a cordless tool that uses the same battery. I spoke to Worx, it's WORX. They have a cordless jigsaw that can be purchased with or without the battery and charger, and their 20-volt battery that works with their jigsaw works in a bunch of their other cordless tools. Cordless tools are going to give you more portability. They're usually going to be heavier than a corded tool. You're going to have limited run time unless you have a backup battery, and eventually you're going to have to replace that battery.
What do you prefer?
I generally use a cordless tool, but I still have a corded Craftsman jigsaw that my dad bought me when I first started investing in real estate, and it's got to be about 40 years old. It's 2.5 amps, and I've used it on a ton of projects over the years, which I'm not going to share the stories with you.
Yeah.
It has a knob on top to turn the blade for cutting curves into wood, which I never got the hang of using, so I would just keep the blade locked forward and move the tool to follow a cut line. The blade clamp on this has 2 set screws, so this uses the old U-shank blades. And you've got one in front and one on the side, and you have to use a slotted screwdriver to tighten them. So it's a real drag, man, to load and remove the blades. And I'll take a picture of it and put it on Instagram if you're into vintage power tools. So you can check us out on Instagram, Fix It Home Improvement. I took a look at the jigsaws at the home centers, and they range...
I know, we went on a field trip this week.
And it was exciting.
For one of us.
So the the corded jigsaws range from 3 amps to 7.2 amps. Higher amps usually means you have a larger motor with more power.
Is it heavier?
And heavier, but the amps you draw doesn't always equal the power output. UL and other independent testing labs rate the saw based on the continuous amps used non-stop without damaging the motor or overheating the wiring and the parts. It's not comparing the torque or power of the tool. So if you're looking at a 3 amp jigsaw and a 6 amp jigsaw, it's not necessarily going to be twice as powerful. I would compare the features and price more than the amp rating for a saw that you're going to be using around the house for home repair projects.
Right.
Cordless saws I looked at...
Well, just on the corded ones, and it was interesting that the power cords, the length of them were different.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to compare. Cordless saws that I looked at, they range from 12 to 20 volts. Higher volts in general is going to mean more power. When you're looking at the battery rating, you're going to see it in amp hours. It's going to be a capital A and a small case H. The higher the number, the longer the runtime. The motors can be brushed or brushless, and about half of the saws I looked at were brushless. A tool with brushes will need them to be replaced over time. So if you have to shake or hit your tool for it to start, or if it stalls occasionally, or if you see more sparking than usual coming out of the vents, the brushes probably need to be replaced, and you should replace them in pairs. The brush is what's conducting electricity to the moving part of the motor, and it slowly wears away, so it's going to have to be replaced.
Right.
A brushless tool has less maintenance, so you're not going to have to replace these parts. They're usually more powerful and lighter than comparable brush tools, and cordless brushless tools are going to use less battery power. Most jigsaws have a tool-free blade holder, or it's called keyless.
Right.
I looked at Home Depot. Out of 103 jigsaws, 94 were keyless, so you don't need a tool to change the blade. And the keyless blade holders generally work with the T-shank blades. That T-shape on the top is going to lock it into the blade holder. And most have a lever that rotates to release the blade, so it's pretty easy. Older jigsaws use the U-shank blades. The top of the blade is a U-shape. At Lowe's, they had 21 different types of blades on display that were T-shank. Only 3 were U-shape. So if you're getting a jigsaw, I would get one that uses the T-shank.
Right.
If you're shopping at a local hardware store, or I guess any home center, you need to watch out for old stock or sales on tools like this, because, they keep these tools forever. They might be selling a tool that only accepts the U-shank. And then you're going to need a screwdriver or a hex tool to change your blade.
Right, because how many jigsaws do you think they sell in a year?
I don't know. I would think it's pretty popular.
I don't.
Most of the jigsaws are going to have a D-style handle, so you're holding this on the top of the saw, although some people prefer a barrel-style handle, and this comes straight off the back of the motor. They say it gives more control to follow your cut line and more control when you're doing bevel cuts. Most saws will have variable speed control. The harder you press the trigger, the faster the blade speed. Some will have a dial or settings to set the top speed, so when you pull the trigger, you can lock it in a certain speed. Some have a lock for the trigger, so you can set the speed and then release your finger and it'll stay on. So if you have long cuts, you can focus on your cut. Some will have a trigger lock, and this is going to help prevent accidents. If you have kids around the house, you're going to have to push the release so that you can then depress the trigger. And variable speed is helpful when you're working with different materials and different blade types.
Okay.
Most of the saws I looked at had a top blade speed of around 3,000 strokes per minute, so you'll see SPM. I saw 0 to 3,000, or some start at 500 and go up to 3,000. A few were a little faster. My old Craftsman is 3,000 strokes per minute, so that seems to be a pretty standard speed.
Okay.
Some other features to look for are a light, and that's going to help you follow your cut line. Some have a laser guide, so you can follow your line. And a dust blower is handy. It's going to keep your cut line visible. And some have either a guide or an option to attach an edge guide for long cuts. So if you're doing a lot of work with large sheets of plywood, for example, it's just easier to help you maintain that straight line.
Okay.
Jigsaws with dust extraction allow you to connect a vacuum to your saw. And this is a nice feature if you're going to be doing a lot of work with your saw, and if you're working with plywood or MDF, which can produce hazardous dust. And since we're talking about wood dust, you should be wearing an N95 respirator whenever you're cutting with a saw. The National Cancer Institute says there is a greater risk of lung cancer, sinus, and nasal cavity cancer when you're exposed to wood dust.
Really?
You should also be wearing safety glasses, and I would wear cut-resistant work gloves.
Me too.
Jigsaws that say they have orbital or pendulum settings will help you make faster cuts in wood and plastic. Jigsaws have a roller guide just above the foot plate, and that keeps the blade from twisting, and it gives support to the blade. On a saw with orbital settings, the roller guide is moving forward as the blade is moving up and back as it's moving down, and that's going to cut faster in wood, but it's going to make a rougher cut. But it's great for 2x4s or plywood because you're going to cut through it much faster. You wouldn't use the orbital setting if you're cutting through metal or if you're cutting curves or if you need to make a smooth cut.
Okay.
A foot plate that bevels will allow you to cut at an angle, and many saws now have a lever so you can loosen the foot. Much easier to use and adjust. A saw that comes with a foot plate cover will help protect material that could get scratched from a metal foot. Although you can cover the foot plate with like painter's tape. That's what I used to do. I have a Bosch 18-volt jigsaw with a plastic cover. It has an adjustable shoe, but I have to use a hex key to loosen it and adjust it. So the leverage is much better. This uses T-shank blades. It has keyless blade change, and it has an insulated D-grip, which will help protect you against a shock if you accidentally cut into hidden electrical wires. And it also has a brake, so it stops the blade very quickly when you release the trigger, where a lot of the corded jigsaws, when you release the trigger, that blade is still moving for a couple of seconds.
That's a bummer.
So those are nice features to look for. When you're shopping for a jigsaw, I would see if it comes with a case for storage and travel. I would also compare the warranties. When I spoke to Works, they have a 2-in-1 jigsaw and reciprocating saw called the Axis, AXIS. The saw pivots out, so it can be used like a reciprocating saw, and then it pivots down and transforms into a jigsaw.
No way.
And the blade clamp accepts T-shank jigsaw blades and reciprocating saw blades. Very cool. The only thing that it doesn't do is the base doesn't bevel.
Okay.
Work said one of the ways to cut an opening into the center of wood is to create a hole with a drill bit large enough to fit your jigsaw blade into. And if you don't have a drill handy, you can actually rest the front edge of your saw on your work with the blade above the wood, turn on the saw, and slowly lower the blade onto the wood, and you can create a plunge cut without needing a drill bit. But you really got to hold on to it and do it slowly.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure you're always matching the blade to the material you're cutting, so read the label on the blades and match the blade length so it passes about an inch past the bottom of your work. With blades that cut on the upstroke, the foot plate is being pulled down against your material, and that's going to help give you more control.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty cool design. If you're using a laminate blade or a blade that cuts on the downstroke, you need to hold firmly and move slowly. You want to let the blade do the work because the blade can push up on the tool, causing a kickback or damage to your material.
Okay.
One article I read on Jigsaw Blades recommended 6 to 8 teeth per inch for fast, rough cuts in wood, 10 to 14 teeth per inch for fine or smooth cuts in wood, and 16 to 20 teeth per inch for a very fine finish. And you'll see TPI on the label for teeth per inch. For metal, 14 to 18 TPI for a semi-smooth finish, 24 TPI for a smooth finish, and 36 TPI for a very smooth finish. In general, the more teeth per inch, the smoother your finish is going to be. The less teeth per inch, you're going to get a faster cut, but you're going to have a rougher finish.
Mm-hmm.
In general, when you're looking at blades, if you see high carbon steel, this is better for soft wood. They're inexpensive. You'll see HCS.
Mm-hmm.
High speed steel, HSS, is good for soft or hard woods, thin metal and plastic, very versatile. Bimetal is a mix for wood and metal. Again, read the label to see what it's designed for. Carbide grit coated blades work well for ceramics, steel, fiberglass, but check the label for what it's designed for and the recommended speed for the best results. I looked at a few of the blades that I have in my Jigsaw case.
What'd you find?
Some cool stuff. So I have one bimetal all-purpose blade for wood and metal. It's 5 inches long from the top to the bottom of the blade, and the label is marked 5-10 TPI. So the top of the blade is 10 teeth per inch. So it's going to give a smoother finish, especially to wood. It's going to cut through the fibers. And then the bottom of the blade is 5 teeth per inch. So you get a faster cut. So you're kind of getting the best of two worlds, which is pretty interesting. It's 5 inches. It goes 3.5 inches past the bottom of the shoe. So that gives you an idea of how thick the material you can cut with this.
Right.
A metal cutting blade I have is HSS. It's 17-24 TPI. So it's the same concept where as the blade is pulling up, you've got 24 teeth per inch, so you're going to get a smoother finish, and then 17 TPI on the lower part, so it cuts a little faster. And this goes 2 inches past the bottom of the shoe. And another blade I have is an HCS wood bit. It's only 6 teeth per inch. It's 3 7/8 inch long. It has offset teeth. So this is very aggressive. You're going to get a very fast cut with this, but you're going to end up with a rough finish.
Okay.
Some top-rated jigsaws come from DeWalt. It's capital D-E, capital W-A-L-T. Makita, M-A-K-I-T-A, and they've been around since 1915. Bosch, B-O-S-C-H, they've been around since 1886.
Wow. Black
& Decker, Milwaukee, Ryobi, R-Y-O-B-I, Rigid, Skill, it's S-K-I-L, Works, W-O-R-X, and Porter Cable.
Do you have anything else to add?
A jigsaw is a good basic tool, very versatile for projects around the house.
Nothing about jigsaw puzzles?
You know,
or Jigsaw. Wasn't that the guy from Saw?
The horror movies?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the first...
You didn't talk about that at all. I'm very disappointed.
Not close enough to Halloween. So in the late 1700s, the first jigsaw puzzles were invented in London. The gentleman was a map engraver, and he would mount his maps onto pieces of wood, and then cut around all of the countries, and he gave these puzzles to the local schools so they could make a game out of learning the countries and their locations.
You should probably do that now. Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, CastBox, or your favorite podcast app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our ebooks, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, books 1 through 12 on Amazon.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow Cindy on Twitter at FixItCohost, and you can follow us on Instagram, Fix It Home Improvement.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.